Again, I'm Marcia Day Childress from the Center for Biomedical Ethics and Humanities. We're very happy to see all of you here today for the Medical Center Hour. Today's program, I'm proud to say, is the first in the Medical Center Hour's 44th season of continuous production. So for nearly 4.5 decades now, this hour at midday in midweek has hosted some of the medical schools and UVA's richest conversations on current and sometimes contentious topics of common concern to medicine and society. One hallmark of Medical Center Hour's ongoing conversation is that it is always involved with a healthy cross-section of our community, including members of the public. We're most grateful for the School of Medicine's ongoing support, and especially for funding that comes through several endowed lectureships, including through the John F. Anderson Memorial Lectureship Endowment. This was a gift made in 1955 by medical alumnus Dr. John Anderson. His gift keeps on giving a full 60 years later and counting. And today's program is one of our John Anderson lectures. We're grateful as well for you, our audience, and we look forward to your presence and participation in the 22 programs we'll bring you this year. Week by week, speakers and subjects come and go, but at its heart, Medical Center Hour is your forum. It's your voices and your views that make this vibrant learning exercise the good activity and the enriching activity that it is. So keep us on your calendar and keep coming. And if you can't come in person, know that most of our programs are video recorded and posted within a week of their live presentation on our dedicated YouTube channel, and there is information in your handout about that. For our program today, Main Street and Mental Health, Making Healthy Cities, I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Mindy Thompson Fullilove. This is actually a welcome back to Dr. Fullilove, as she spoke for a Medical Center Hour here about maybe 10 years ago. A research psychiatrist at the New York State Psychiatric Institute and professor of clinical psychiatry and public health at Columbia University, Dr. Fullilove has long pursued a deep interest in the connections between the collapse of communities, displacement of populations, and declines in individual and collective health. She's described as a public health psychiatrist, or as journalist Robert Sullivan suggested in a New York Times Magazine article last June, a town shrink. In the wake of a summer in which violence, racial tensions, and income and health inequalities have more sorely than ever challenged many American cities, is there any wonder that facing these urban dire straits, we might turn to Mindy Fullilove? Is there a doctor in the house? This doctor's writings, the 2005 book Root Shock, and the recent Urban Alchemy, Restoring Joy in America's Sorted Out Cities, are unusual books. They bridge several fields: medicine, architecture, urban planning, public health, narrative studies, anthropology, music, and social psychology, among others. They make for absorbing, galvanizing reading, and UVA bookstores outside with copies of Urban Alchemy for sale and signing after the program. These books are also meant to put people from different disciplines in constructive dialogue and into action together about how we might mend our broken cities and reconnect our communities to make them whole, healthy, and joyful places. On this occasion of Dr. Fullilove's visit, conversations in this vein have intensified at UVA, and we trust they'll continue doing so among the various partners who sponsor her visit and this program today: the Generalist Scholars Program and the Department of Public Health Sciences in the School of Medicine, and the Department of Urban and Environmental Planning and the Center for Design and Health in the School of Architecture. In this Medical Center Hour, Dr. Fullilove will suggest that we look at and to Main Street as we seek to foster mental health in our communities. And since we're observing Primary Care Week and placing an emphasis on community health and well-being, we've also asked second-year medical student Danielle Oliver, one of our generalist scholars, to offer a brief response. How might primary care practitioners contribute to the effort to revive Main Street as a whole, healthy, and joyful place? And I will finally satisfy the CME office and tell you that neither Dr. Fullilove nor Ms. Oliver had any financial conflicts of interest to disclose. So now, on to Main Street. Welcome.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. I think I have 2 microphones.
They won't interfere with each other.
Oh, great. But I don't have the clip. All right, now I'm fully equipped. Hi, everybody. I've been studying Main Streets for 7 years, and I just go see Main Streets and I visit them and hang out on Main Streets and I think about them, I take photographs of them, but I've actually never talked about Main Streets until today. So in a way, this is kind of I'm just trying to tell you what I think, and I would love to hear what you think about what I think. All of you have been to Main Streets, or as much experts on Main Street as I am. You probably haven't spent as much time obsessing about Main Streets, but you're consumers of Main Streets, wherever you come from, living here. So I really look forward to your good thoughts. When I was at the airport coming here, I was delighted to see that Time magazine was Marijuana Goes Main Street. Everything goes Main Street. And as a psychiatrist, this is partly what has fascinated me. That this term Main Street, especially in 2008 when I was starting, was just thrown around all the time. And in 2008, because there was a big financial crash, the whole idea of Main Street versus Wall Street was really hot. Billboards, banks would say, we're Main Street, no, Wall Street. You may remember Occupy Wall Street. So the whole Wall Street, Main Street thing really took on a lot of meaning. On the other hand, we popularly say, and in the handout that Marcia prepared, it says, Main Streets are dead, or nearly dead. So if Main Streets are dead, why are we talking about Main Street? What are we talking about? What's going on? And psychiatrists of my generation, who were heavily influenced by psychoanalysis, love this kind of vague question. There was another really weird thing, which was at the time I started the study, I had hyperparathyroidism. And one of the symptoms of it that I had was that I thought I was dead. Not I wanted to be, I wasn't suicidal, I thought I was dead because I had so much calcium I couldn't get from one end of a sentence to the other. And Main Streets were dead and I was dead. I was like, I think I'll go to Main Street, we'll be dead together. Which is the kind of thing that people who aren't psychiatrists find really weird, like, ooh, she's really crazy. But psychiatrists, it's just sort of, as I was growing up in psychiatry, how we talk, that, just sort of, that is what happened. I thought I was dead, they were dead, so let me go hang out on Main Street. So what I did. So I like this. This is like a puzzle. What is it? My thought at the beginning was that I would go see 100 Main Streets. This is most of the Main Streets that I've been to. And also, I paid a lot of attention to the Main Streets where I was living. I happen to live in 3 different New Jersey cities. So this is more or less my data set. And I also wrote a blog, Countdown to Main Street. And so whenever the spirit moved me, would write a post about what I could see. So there's all kinds of things on there. So blogs are great. Sort of allows you to just nail down points in time and what you were thinking. When I first started going to Main Street, the thing that I was thinking about was really, kind of this simple, like what's the first layer? Is what are the contents? What's on Main Street? If you go there, what's on Main Street? And my thought was pretty concrete, that what's on Main Street is what makes Main Street work or not. So there are things that are staples of Main Street, you might say. So a really lucky Main Street has a supermarket, a church, If I tell you where all these photos are from, it'll take too long, so just take my word for it, they're from that list. They might have remarkable structures like this Chinatown gate, dogs, an amazing number of dogs on Main Street, live dogs, stuffed dogs. Really weird things like this baby Buddha. They have people, always have people, and these people, that's my mom and my granddaughter, are in front of the Orange Public Library. Public libraries are an important staple contents of Main Street. In fact, the civic organizations that are on Main Street are kind of the benevolent face of society. So the post office is on Main Street, the library is on Main Street, City Hall is usually not on Main Street, and the police office is almost never on Main Street, which I think is good. You don't pay your taxes on Main Street, you get a book. There are all kinds of decorations and symbolic things, more churches. Another lucky thing to find on a Main Street is a bookstore, and lots and lots and lots of postings of all kinds. So what's gonna come, all the events that are coming up in the city, who, babysitters, who will clean your yard, so lots and lots and lots of signs. Pharmacies are a staple of Main Street. Rare, but there are museums. This one is at the beginning of Broadway, of course, one of the greatest Main Streets. By the way, to date, I think the absolute star Main Street of the United States of America is Decatur Street in New Orleans. I think it can't be beat in terms of its contents. It's, because it's got the Cathedral of St. Louis just opposite a park by the Mississippi River. And before there was so much junk between the Mississippi and the city, it must have been really, really, really even more spectacular than it is today. So it's really quite a jewel. But Broadway isn't that. And Broadway runs through Times Square, which is always full of people. So the sort of things that engage people are quite common. On Broadway, by the library, by the museum, there's also the Canyon of Heroes. And so when they have those ticker tape parades, so they've put these markers in the street so that you can see who got a ticker tape parade. And so Main Streets like to tell you about themselves. There are all kinds of ways in which they do that. Lots of food on Main Street. If you're hungry, go straight to Main Street. And my fave, my personal fave, Benjamin Moore. Now, I don't know why, this is one of the things I have to find out, but I haven't found out yet. I don't know yet why Benjamin Moore has such an active Main Street sign program. But at least in my part of the country, Benjamin Moore signs, they vary in size, but they're everywhere. I think it's great. And I think it's bright red, it's very attractive. It's kind of understated in a large way, if you can be understated in a large way. So they brighten up the street. Anyway, those are the contents. That's what you see. Go to Main Street. You see some variation of that on every Main Street. And I haven't been to that many countries. So France, Germany, Austria, Japan, and South Africa are my sample. So that's not that many countries. But in those countries, you see variations of those things. Well, one of the things about Main Street is that it's changing. Delightfully, this is one of the... If you look closely, people are always making jokes on Main Street. They really are. So all kinds of things happen on Main Street. We were doing a study of violence in Washington Heights, and my team was out taking photos of this back in 1996. And there was a big, huge bust going on because there was a lot of drug activity in the neighborhood at that time. And here's a girl walking through eating a banana. We call that photo Girl with a Banana, and all the graduates of our program get a copy of that photo. So spring, destruction. These gargoyles were on a building in my hometown, and a woman from another country had bought the building and she thought the gargoyles were bringing her bad luck, so she chopped them off. So it's sort of, whatever, it's gone. The gargoyles are gone. I feel so bad every time I look at this photo that he's gone. Anyway, that's him being chopped away. Old neon signs. And then ephemeral in the sense of the moment. So, a big race in Pittsburgh, going down Shady Ave. Things that people put up to celebrate their city. So, you know how everybody has like a statue of something? So, horses, moose, ducks, whatever. And things that are falling apart, these old train tracks in Allentown, Pennsylvania, as well as the leaves, the fall leaves. Rainbows, you can barely see it, but there's a rainbow over Main Street, and pumpkins, and Christmas lights. And Main Street itself as something, can be something temporary. So this is a Christmas fair in Berlin that's erected just, in a street where not much is happening. But everybody is there shopping for Christmas presents, a wonderful Christmas fair. But it's kind of a temporary expression of Main Street. So Main Street is constantly changing. And this sense of morning and night, seasons passing by, things getting destroyed, things getting created, things being invented, people making jokes. All of this is part of the temporariness, the ever-changing content of Main Street. It really, if you spend enough time on Main Streets, you come to believe that those people who said you never step in the same river twice knew what they were talking about. You never step in the same river twice. There's a bakery in Orange, New Jersey, my hometown, and Jeannie, it's a historic bakery, and Jeannie, who is the current owner, changes her window very regularly, and I have a whole collection of photos of her storeroom. Anyway, that's Christmas. What I was saying about dogs. The other dog happened to also be Jeannie's window, but I'm telling you, there's a lot of dogs. Dogs in the windows, dogs that are statues. I've been thinking, what is the animal you most commonly see on Main Street? Because I was wondering if it was a lion, because there are a lot of lions on Main Street. But I think possibly it's the dog. So having looked at the contents, on the one hand I thought, this isn't, what's ever going on here, which about 2 years into my study I didn't know. I don't know what's going on, but I don't think it's about the contents. So I decided to look at structure. And so the question is, what is the structure of Main Street? Because I thought of Main Street as the commercial center of the city. So one of the things that was the first thing to fall by the wayside was I thought every city had a Main Street. And then I quickly discovered that actually any city of any size meaning, I don't even know how small it is before neighborhoods start to differentiate and have their own commercial centers. But a big city has lots of Main Streets, so I gave up that one. So I just tried to track in every city the Main Streets I've been to. So I haven't been to every Main Street in every city that I've been to. I've been to a Main Street at least. So part of it is the structure is that Main Street is the center of something. So that was very clear to me. But I'm still thinking of Main Street as this commercial thing, when all of a sudden one day I was like, oh, it's a street. Well, every urban planning or architect or landscape architect is like, yeah, it's a street, it's a street. This is where psychiatry kind of falls short. I mean, I don't think too much about streets. I was like, oh, it's a street, I drove there, I'm going to drive away. So, well, one of the things about the structure that I think is really important is the general store. So this is a general store in Vermont, which has handy things you might want to buy, food, some mailboxes, a thrift store upstairs, and it's a place where you can come and sit down and drink a cup of coffee and exchange gossip. When my medical school classmate Martha Stillman and I were there, we heard a story about a lost dog. And it was a kind of a classic Main Street story. the dog had run away, and somebody had found the dog and was keeping the dog. And so the people who had lost the dog were frantic, and then they were stopping everywhere to see if anybody had seen the dog. And so these two stories converged at the general store, and people were able to get their dog there. So it was just a wonderful, wonderful story. So the general store has all these functions, but part of those contents of Main Street, if you think about it, so here we have the post office becomes its own building. We have the restaurant becomes its own building. The thrift store becomes its own building, or it becomes a fancy dress shop. Various things you might want to buy become a whole bunch of different stores. So the whole evolution of Main Street is the differentiation of this hub into a strip of services, supplying people with what they need. And then part of the issue in Main Street is, does it lose or keep that it's a place where you can find your dog? If you can't find your dog, the Main Street is falling apart. If you can still find your dog, that's really the issue. So Jake Eisenberg, who was then a medical student at Yale, came to work with me for a semester, and we came up with this idea that Main Street was a box, so kind of the box of the commercial center, that Main Street was a circle, meaning at the neighborhood scale, the area around the Main Street, and that Main Street was also a line, so that it was the line that was going through the city and taking you onward to other places. Just to illustrate, so this is Memphis, Tennessee, you see B.B. King's, and there's the box. This is the sides of the box, the bottom of the box, the sky is the top of the box, and that's the box of Main Street. The integrity of the pieces of the box give you the kind of the holding power of the street. A lot of the action is in when you go there, do you feel the power of what's holding you? In psychiatry, we talk about mothers as part of what they have to do for kids to make them feel safe is holding. Holding doesn't necessarily mean that you're holding the kid. Holding means that the kid knows that you're somewhere and you're going to catch them if they're about to fall. And this changes, so all of you who are medical students don't need your mom as close, but you need your mom or your mother-like figure at the other end of the phone. On bad days, you need to call up and say, Mom, where are you? And so it's this holding feeling. And mothers who are really good at this, even after they've passed on to their great reward, their children feel held. They remember the feeling of mom taking good care of them. And that keeps them feeling safe even when they're great-grandmothers and holding future generations. What is clear about place is that place has a parallel function. So place is supposed to hold us. And it's also supposed to let us go. So it has this dual function. And so this box of Main Street is holding, but also the fact that it's going somewhere, and we can go there. And it came from somewhere, and we can go there. This is the freeing. So good Main Streets do that. You get there and you feel like you are someplace. And it's kind of fun to be there. Because if you look carefully, you're going to find a joke, you're going to find a temporary art exhibit, you're going to learn something about the seasons, all kinds of things are going to be going on, and it's going to be exciting for you. So this is the mall in Charlotte, which has a great box. But part of this is that the box is embedded in the circle. And the circle is phenomenally important for the functioning of Main Street. At one point in American urban planning, people had the idea that all they needed was the facade, like the box, the part of the box that was facing the Main Street was all they needed. They didn't need what was on the other side. If you think of this as kind of like a Western movie, some of you are old enough to have seen the movie Blazing Saddles, and there's one point where you see that the set is just a facade and then it falls over. But in fact, so this is the mall, and see how all these buildings are there? You happen to need the back side, I believe. You can't just make it a parking lot. This circle, the density and the integrity of the circle and the connections out are a supporting system. It's like when you are trying to think about a tree and where do you plant a tree. You can't just give it a little circle like that for it to get enough water and then all asphalt. It's supposed to have earth really as big as the space of the leaves. Think how big that is. So a main street needs to have physical integrity, this circle, all the way out the distance of the people who will walk there from their homes. And then the line. The way Jake and I looked at this problem was to take Essex County and follow the streets. So this is one of the major streets out from Newark. And you can see that there are a whole series of commercial centers lined up along Bloomfield Avenue. So that's the sense in which Main Street is a line. It has continuity, it keeps going. I think about the idea that you could get on Main Street and go to California. I like that idea. Just Main Street to Main Street, never get on a highway. And a lot of these main streets were the early turnpikes. So they were meant for people to go what were then long distances. When Jake and I were doing this work, we did it in the context of this map, which is the redlining map of Essex County, New Jersey. Redlining was a program of the federal government, the Homeowners Loan Corporation, which graded areas according to this scale. So they were green, blue, yellow, and red. And it's basically a 2x2 table of white, non-white, old housing, new housing. So the green is white people and new housing, and the red is non-white people. In this instance, in Newark, it's black people and old housing. And basically, the redlining maps were created to give instructions to the banking system about where it was safe to invest money. Now, one of the things we found that's really quite interesting, first of all, this whole blue area is basically not developed at that time. So this area is developed, is that the main streets that were really lively and functional were not simply in areas that were rich, but it was two parts. One, mainly it had to do with, was it built in this era, which is before what Jay calls the great age of the automobile? And was the investment maintained, or did it really fall prey to massive disinvestment? So Orange, New Jersey, my hometown, is a poor city, and majority black city, has a great main street. But East Orange, so the border with Orange, so you go from Orange, Great Main Street, into East Orange, terrible Main Street, all falling apart, a wreck. It's not the infrastructure, they had the same infrastructure built around the same era, same history, but disinvestment had undermined East Orange in a way that Orange remained stable much longer, until now. So it's fascinating how this underlying map of investment is interacting with what people are actually doing on their main street, and the fundamental importance of the automobile. So that the towns in Essex County that are built out afterwards have terrible main streets. And they're wealthier, but they didn't build for people to walk. And they didn't build for centers, they built for malls. So the structure is, I became clear, not the function. The structure is a manifestation of it, but I'm still left with the problem. So what is the function of main streets? Why do we build main streets? And then, the deep question, isn't a mall just as good? None of you have asked me that question yet, but everybody asks me that. It's like, well, if you're studying main streets, isn't a mall just as good as a main street? So at this point, I wanted to show you two photos, two pieces of art. This snowman, which is in my neighborhood this winter, and this, which is right here in your city, Lewis and Clark, and Sacagawea. Now, what Main Street is about, I think. And so you might scratch your head and say, so what is that? I think that Main Streets tell us who we are and how we're supposed to act. And they give us practice at being who we're supposed to be. And so both some of the terrible messages of our culture show up on Main Street and some of the great messages. There's kind of like the folk messages and then the powerful messages. So this is about these really gorgeous white men on this sort of heroic white man statuary era. And the woman of color who's kneeling. Now, they didn't get to the West because they knew where they were going. They got there because they listened to her. Now, they were smart. You have to give them their props. They actually listened to Psych Way. They knew that she knew what was going on. And so they all got there together. And that's actually the message. But that's not the message of the statue. Great, beautiful, they're so handsome. This is a whole era of, World War I, gorgeous men statue. We wouldn't do this now because now would be just more. We wouldn't do it. We wouldn't draw the white men like that. But look at this woman of color kneeling. So there's this guy. He's just standing there by the tire store. He lost his arm, but he's having a good time. And somebody just had the idea when they went to work at the tire store that they should make a snowman. And they didn't want to make just the balls, they made a whole man. That was really cute. So it's this tension. And then what we are supposed to do as citizens is manage this. We're supposed to manage the folk and the oppressive and keep pushing it forward. And this is the point at which I decided I would have to read Sinclair Lewis's novel, Main Street. Now, you might think if you're doing a study on Main Street that you would read this great American novel first. But I kind of like to just go in the field and wander around, and then after I kind of get my ideas together, after I've seen what's out there, so I know the contents and I know the structure, I kind of know what I'm thinking about, then I want to read. So I just read it. This is the cover from the first edition, and it's a wonderful cover because it depicts the protagonist, Carol, looking at Main Street. This book is terrible. Do not read this book. But it was a very popular, sold like so many copies, and he got a Pulitzer Prize. He almost got a Pulitzer Prize for this book, but they took it back. Then when he got a Pulitzer Prize for his next book, he gave it back. Go figure. I would have taken it, the second one, but anyway. She's looking at Main Street, right? So everybody who does all these postmodern studies, it's all about the gaze, right? She's looking at it. And why is she looking at it? And for some reason, so this book was published in 1921, it's sort of post-World War I. This reminded me of the song. And can you get that? And look at as they play the song, you might have to see an ad for it.
Can I take a picture of this call?
Ever since he broke up, he's been harassing me.
I'm just gonna go over there and talk to him man to man. That's it. He doesn't want anything to do.
Check out the visuals that go with this.
I've been thinking there is wifey dear. Now that all is peaceful and calm, the boys will soon be back on the pond. Mr. Reuben started winking and slowly rubbed his chin. He pulled his hair up close to mother and he answered with a grin. How you gonna keep 'em down on the farm after they leave Harry? How you gonna keep 'em away from Broadway, General, and mystery. They'll never want to see a razor flower. And who's the Duke in Hollywood town? How you gonna keep them down on the farm after they've seen Paris?
We could stop it. So I think the best line is, who the deuce can parlez-vous a cow? But I started thinking, my train of free association, what did they see in Paris that they would rather have than the farm? And this is the key. It's like, what is Carol seeing? Carol is coming from Minneapolis to Gopher Prairie, this little godforsaken little village. And she's horrified. She's like, oh my God. So that's what she's looking at. She's looking at, it takes her 15 minutes to walk the whole of Main Street, and she can't plan what she wants to have for dinner. She has to go see what they have in the stores. There's no choice, it's all imposed. And when she says to them, hey, can't we juice this up? They're like, why would you want to? So she's gasping for breath, so she runs away to Washington, D.C. But eventually she realizes that she had friends in Gopher Prairie, so she goes back. But she goes back determined to find a way to make it a more satisfying place. I've given you the synopsis, that's all you need to know about Main Street. But this is what they saw in Paris, right? Café Terrasse in Paris during the war. Really, it's all about, there were people in the streets, there was life in the streets. Paris is a city of people moving in the streets. The streets of Paris, all the streets of Paris are always full of people. Very dense city and very populated. And it's really built. And when it was reorganized by Baron Haussmann, it was to intensify and glorify the street life. And the Impressionist painters were enchanted by that transformation, and many of the Impressionist paintings are about people just being in the streets. So if you think about the contrast between this, not much to see, and this, I think we get very close to the function of Main Street, that the function of Main Street is not simply to have a few stores. The function of Main Street is this. The function of Main Street is to bring us together. This is Newark, New Jersey, Broad Market, one of the busiest intersections in the United States. And you just see streetcars and wagons and tons of people all moving around. Lots of stores, but look at the street life. So it's the combination that this box of the street, Market Street, but what it's doing is creating a kind of this place in which we meet each other. It's a public room of sorts. Now, you can't go into the middle of the room because there are cars there, they're running over, but the sidewalks and the crosswalks and some of the public spaces and some of the third spaces are the places where we meet, where we encounter, where we learn how to be civilized. So my model of how Main Street relates to mental health is, as of today, but this might change, that there are three parts. One is the term, one is called collective effervescence, which is a concept that people get together, like they get together at church, or it actually comes from sort of tribal ceremonies where people gather and they do all kinds of things, like the Maasai jump up and down for a long, long time. And they just have a great ecstatic experience together. So, thanks. So, collective effervescence is part of it. Here's a wedding spilling out onto Main Street, and people are just having so much joy. And it's the kind of thing that when these great ceremonies pass by, everybody participates in it. I once saw a funeral where the deceased was being taken to the internment in a glass carriage drawn by two of the most beautiful black horses I've ever seen in my life. And everybody was stopping to participate in this So we participate in everything about it, and we become part of the joy. It's this collective effervescence. This is something that we want to feel. The ultimate is Times Square on New Year's Eve. You know, where the sort of, just the as we do the countdown, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, hey, Happy New Year. The second is that it's very much about cognition, about information. And it's information about what's going on in our society. So the messages are not messages in the simple sense, cognitions in the simple sense, but really in the most symbolic and abstract sense. This is an old neon in Jersey City. And what's important here is that this is saying this is an up-and-coming part of Jersey City, the sort of new downtown. That's the gentrification. And this is the old neon. So this is now taken over and this is gone. So the cognition is, what's happening is the tensions. What's going on in the city, the process, the direction of the city, is on display for us to read if we will pay attention. This is a hugely symbolic part of the conversation. And in order to really begin to speak that symbolic language, I have spent a lot of time with a poet, a local poet, Michael Lally, who's quite a remarkable poet of the city, and really helped me to kind of begin to think in symbolic ways. We do think in symbolic ways. It's not that I don't think in symbolic ways or you don't think in symbolic ways. It's how you begin to articulate, oh, I'm looking at a symbol and I'm reacting to it. And the third part is social comfort. That we go there and we are known, we participate, we know the rituals, we are part of the stream of life. These together make a sane society. We have to have places where we cross paths with people we don't know, people we do know, people who are the pillars of society, people who are the folk artists bubbling up from the bottom. We all have to cross paths and have these ways of being in the space and knowing each other. We have to learn to encounter each other if we're going to make civilization. I think this is predicated, if and only if, we share. I think if the resources are all in one place and not in another, that it can't work. But some of these resources are things like good planning and not giving everything away to the automobile. So it's complicated what it is we have to share. But this is my model. And the conclusion is that we are not just consumers of Main Street, we have to become players, which is actually a lot of fun. So that's my daughter Molly. We were at Occupy Wall Street. This is our Free People's University of Orange. We have an annual placemaking event, and so we were doing graffiti haiku. So these are all haiku we were writing all over Main Street. This is me with a whole bunch of Harlem clergy who were protesting new zoning regulations for Harlem. So I was at a protest on 125th Street. This is a protest at Broad Market over the shooting of Trayvon Martin. And this is Molly and me and our colleagues from the University of Orange going out to explore the valley, where we've been doing a lot of redevelopment work. And this is we do a tour, regularly do a tour of Orange called Everything You Want to Know About the American City You Can Learn in Orange, New Jersey. So this is taking a whole bunch of people out on our tour. And then finally, a recent great story from Erie, Pennsylvania. This is Main Street in our little city right outside Erie. And so that's the Main Street. But inside the building, which is Local 506 Union Hall, there's a most spectacular mural by Juana Alicia, which tells the story of workers in the United States and Mexico, and it's about a woman's places in the Union. And there's only 3 men in the mural, and one of them is my dad, who's right there, who was one of the people who built the Union and was head of its Fair Employment Practices Committee. And I had wanted to go there for a while, but getting to Erie, Pennsylvania is, a little bit of a project. But there's the most stunning, gorgeous mural that the picture, pictures can't do this mural justice. It's so big and so vibrant. And it was just one of those moments of feeling just overwhelmed by, because my dad loved that work. And to see it honored in this mural, in this place, was on Main Street, was one of those moments that you treasure for your whole life. So you can make this work in your city or any city by doing these things. Take walks to see your city, tell stories, find the elephants, which are the remarkable places that make your city unique. And most of all, don't try to make it cute, try to make it fair. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Danielle Oliver, and as Dr. Childress said, I'm a second-year medical student and a member of the Journalist Scholars Program. I am honored to speak this afternoon on the behalf of Dr. Mindy Fullilove and her work. I must apologize if what I say ends up seeming non sequitur with her talk. I was just most moved by her book, Root Shock, so my response is mostly to that with an integration of the concept of Main Street. So I began reading Dr. Fullilove's book, Root Shock, this summer. And I must admit, I read it slowly. Not because it lacked relevance or was not compelling, but because it was so much of those things. Dr. Fullilove dissects the long-lasting effects of community upheaval and neglect. And at home, it seemed as though that disparaging story was unfolding before my very eyes. Home for me is Washington, D.C. While it is distinct as the nation's capital, D.C. suffered the plight of numerous American cities in the 20th century. After the riots following the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. in 1968, many sections of the city were abandoned and remained destitute for decades. However, since the beginning of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, an explosion of federal defense contracts has brought millions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of people to the area. Many consider this development a rebirth. However, the story is multifaceted, and not all sides are positive. A super zip is a term coined by American Enterprise Institute scholar and author Charles Murray, used to describe the country's most prosperous, highly educated demographic clusters. On average, these zip codes have a median household income of $120,000, and 7 in 10 adults have college degrees. Due to the influx of new residents and wealth, the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area now has the largest number of super zips in the country. The latest census data shows that more than a third of zip codes in the D.C. area are in the top 5% nationally for both income and education. Yet inherently within the definition of super zip is a problem. It demonstrates that wealth, resources, and ultimately we can imagine hope is concentrated in only certain areas. Certain areas thrive, while others continue to fail. Prior to the riots, the 14th Street corridor was an area known for Black-owned businesses and prosperity. Unfortunately, however, this Main Street was the epicenter of the 1968 destruction. Those who could afford to do so moved away. Those who remained were stuck in a neighborhood ridden with prostitution, drugs, and ultimately despair. This area remained this way for years. Yet in 2001, under the slate of new urban plans, a Whole Foods was built in the middle of the 14th Street corridor. Slowly, business returned to the area in what seemed to be an organic fashion. The majority of the businesses were opened by longtime residents of the community. However, large corporations and investors began to look to 14th Street, but not as the center for civic engagement, as a path to profit. The revitalization effort was usurped by outsiders. Over 50 new restaurants were opened along the 14th Street corridor between 2013 and 2014 alone, and only a handful are owned by people who have been in the city for more than 5 years. As expected, rent prices have skyrocketed. The average rental price for a one-bedroom apartment along 14th Street is now over $3,000. Meanwhile, according to the District of Columbia Fiscal Policy Institute, the number of apartments renting for less than $800 in the city has fallen by more than 42%. Based on this data, the Institute has concluded that there are almost no more apartments in DC's open market for less than $800. Displacement is evident in those numbers alone. Not all areas of the city are populated by new millennials and paved with new bike lanes. Many areas are still home to longtime DC residents. Yet these areas are continuously neglected. The main community hospital in Southeast DC, the poorest and predominantly African American quadrant of the city, is the only hospital in the city that lacks a traffic light or a crosswalk in front of its main entrance. 2 pedestrians have been killed while crossing in front of the hospital in this year alone. Even after the latest incident in August, the mayor of DC still has not promised funding for even a crosswalk. Funds remain concentrated in one section of the city. 14th Street seems a world away from the Southern Avenue street. For many long-time DC residents, the 14th Street Main Street, what was intended to be a place of gathering, has become a symbol of division. Today I speak of my hometown. However, this scene is unfolding across the nation, in Oakland, Richmond, Atlanta, and city officials should be forewarned. Revitalization of our American cities is imperative. Centering on a main street is key. However, this development must be executed in a more thoughtful way. Main streets will not be sustained by projects of fleeting self-interest, and a city cannot thrive as a community if it serves only factions of the people. One privileged neighborhood cannot be the only recipient of a new main street. Each and every neighborhood of the city deserves to be revitalized, and for and by the people that make up the space. City growth must be fostered by the residents of the community, not by money-fueled investors. Their goal is to raise capital, yet our goal is to raise healthy families. The notion that Main Street is our way out of despair is centered on an idea of inclusion. If our new development results in exclusion, displacement, or neglect, we have lost sight of our true goal. Throughout our discussions this primary care week, speakers have centered on a theme of meeting people where they are and acknowledging their current struggles and desires. Dr. Fullilove encourages us to go beyond and acknowledge not simply the present state of a community, but also its past. In order to successfully move forward, we must incorporate the history of the place and its people into the new adventures. We must acknowledge those that remained in the neighborhood throughout the despair and the grief, and ensure that it is these residents that receive the greatest support and hope. Dr. Fullilove shows us that this is possible. Cities are intended to be civic centers, sites where families come together for a greater sense of belonging. Dr. Fullilove demonstrates that cities must and can be rebuilt through civic engagement. If we simply involve the residents in the development of our structures and our main streets, we can ensure that the roots of the community remain. Thank you.
Thank you both for wonderful remarks. We have 2 persons with microphones. We're going to move through the auditorium and can take your comments and questions. When you make a comment or ask a question, please identify yourself. And as we're preparing for this, I'd just like to say that one of the things that happened here last night on the occasion of Mindy Fullilove's visit is we had a very vital conversation with a mixed group of medical, nursing, and architecture and planning students last night. And you can see the way these ideas start to come together and inform we hope, the future practice of all of those professionals. So, your comments and questions.
Thank you. Can you say more about, Dr. Fullilove, on this last slide, what you mean by tell stories? How do you see that unfolding, especially in the realm of healthcare?
If I just speak, does this?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. No, I mean, walk around and tell stories as you're walking. Because every place you go through has stories, and you bump into people and they have stories, and then that reminds you of another story, and so that's what we do.
What are some specific legislative policies that can be encouraged to promote more equitable development in cities?
Well, there are all kinds of things you could do. Probably the most important is that we have made the land of cities a commodity. And when we commodify ecosystems, we threaten the survival of the organisms that depend on that ecosystem. So all of us who live in cities depend on the integrity of our habitat for survival. But if it has become a commodity, then the source of our survival gets sold out from under us. So anything that puts constraints on the commodification of land will protect human habitat, and it is a really urgent necessity. So that means rent control, land banking, support for affordable housing, public housing, all of those kinds of things that keep the prices down are important.
Hi. Can you say a little bit more about the way that the cities and main streets that you've observed addressed the issue of people with psychiatric diagnoses on streets and removing people without homes to homes that might be in more isolated places from downtowns? Can you sort of speak to the issue of whether cleaning up people who we maybe don't want to see or smell connects to making a city vital or unhealthy?
Well, I don't think the mentally ill should be on the streets. I mean, other than in the way we're all on the streets. So real failure is not what the cities are doing. The real failure is that when we deinstitutionalize the severely mentally ill, we failed to build the system that we proposed and that we knew would work. So we didn't build the system of halfway houses and supportive housing and mental health centers that are needed. So we created a situation where people with very serious illnesses are trying to fend for themselves, and they're way against the odds. And now what we do is we put them in jail or prison. So the whole thing is a catastrophe. I don't think that the cities are kind of at the end of the line saying, let's get them out of the way, but it's really the whole society and the whole idea that you've just deinstitutionalized people and you don't provide them supports. As a psychiatrist, I watch that happen, and it's just criminal.
I guess I'm interested in your last point on the slide about don't try to make it cute, try to make it fair. So I like the idea of not just trying to make every city into sort of maybe, or every main street into a prototypical cute main street. When you say try to make it fair, does that mean taking into account history and like paying homage to history and trying to make a fair and honest account of the city, or what do you mean by that?
Of course it's a joke, right? What? No, I mean just because fair is a pun. Fair is like a fair meeting, right? So there's that fair, and then there's the other fair, like let's be fair. So let's divide things up equally. So I think that's the fun. So and try to make it fair. Try to be fair with people. Try to give everybody a chance. What Danielle described so eloquently about Washington, D.C. is this tragedy that we're in the midst of that's tearing apart the American city. We're throwing out the poor and moving in the rich, which is a tragedy across the board because money doesn't buy you love. It buys you an apartment, but it doesn't buy you love. And part of what you need in your habitat is love. So it's an across-the-board bad idea of what we're doing. And we're only doing it because it makes money for developers. So instead, we should try to be fair. And one of the things that's fair is that everybody should have stable habitat. All organisms need stable habitat with adequate access to resources. So that's what I think our goal should be. And then, but not so much just cute. Because people get crazy. They go to a neighborhood and they're, because I take lots of walks with lots of people, and they go to a neighborhood and it's a little, worn out, and they're like, well, this isn't very attractive. And then they go to another neighborhood and it's just got all that gentrification going on, like, oh, this is really cute. So that's a bad idea. It's not any depth, it's not any understanding of the city, and it injures all of us.
So we've come to the end of our hour, but I'm sure that having heard this conversation today, when you go out and walk around our city, you're going to see it in a somewhat different way. When you do go for a walk, you can help yourself to a local apple, or 2 or 3 outside, courtesy of the Generalist Scholars Program, and also in observance of Primary Care Week. Keep the doctor away, in a way, or take the doctor on the walk with you. I invite you to come back next week, the 16th of September, when we welcome Rodney Mullen and Dr. Mitch Rosner. Medical Center Hour is combining with Medical Grand Rounds next week to welcome Rodney Mullen, who is a champion professional skateboarder. He's going to talk with us about on risk, resilience, and the art of good practice. So if you're curious, come back.